Dear listeners, I ask you to listen to the story until the very end and be sure to write a review about what you liked and what needs to be changed to make it more interesting for you to listen to my stories. Trigger over Remagen. I still hear it sometimes, the deep echoing rumble of the bridge under fire, the sharp crack of rifle shots, and the scream swallowed by the roar of artillery. You don't forget a thing like that, not when you were there, not when you saw men running across a bridge that wasn't supposed to be standing, when you smelled the burning wood, the iron twisting under pressure, the sickly stench of bodies torn apart. It wasn't just another battle. It was a moment in history that could have turned the tide of war. And we were the poor bastards running straight into it. The Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen. Hell, we didn't even know the name at first. All we knew was that it was still up when it wasn't supposed to be, that the Germans hadn't managed to blow it sky high like they did with every other bridge over the Rhine. And if we got to it before they did, before they could set off their charges and send it crashing into the river below, we could punch a hole right into Germany's gut. No waiting for engineers to throw together pontoons. No more slogging through mud trying to find another way across. We'd be in. But nothing in war is ever that simple. We moved in fast, the 9th Armored Division leading the charge. I was just a grunt, a rifleman in the 78th Infantry, but I could see the chaos before we even got close. The bridge was swarming with German troops, scrambling like ants under fire, trying to fix whatever went wrong with their demolition charges. They were panicking, and that told us everything we needed to know. This wasn't just a lucky break, this was a disaster for them. They hadn't expected us to get here so soon. We were still a few hundred yards out when the first explosion rocked the bridge. My gut clenched. I thought for sure that was it, that we'd come all this way just to watch it fall. But it held. Smoke poured from the side, twisted metal groaning under the strain, but it held. Move, 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 our lieutenant shouted, but we were already running, ducking low as machine gun fire ripped through the air around us. Bullets pinged off the metal girders, throwing sparks, biting into stone and flesh alike. A guy beside me, Parker, went down hard, a red mist bursting from his chest. I didn't stop. None of us did. There was no time. By the time we got onto the bridge, it felt like we'd stepped into hell. German troops were still on the far side, laying down fire, but they were outnumbered. The real danger wasn't them, it was the explosives still wired to the bridge. Their engineers were trying to set them off manually, smashing at the detonators with rifle butts, with anything they could grab. If they got it working before we cleared them out, we were all going into the Rhine. I saw one of them, young, too young, eyes wide with fear as he fumbled with the wires. I raised my rifle, but before I could fire, there was another explosion, closer this time, shaking the whole structure. The German went flying, his body slamming into the iron beams. He didn't get up, but the bridge still stood. I don't know how long it took, minutes, hours, a lifetime, but we fought our way to the other side. The Germans fell back, retreating into the hills, leaving behind bodies and broken weapons. And when the gunfire finally died down, when the smoke started to clear, we were still standing. We had the bridge. For the first time in the war, American troops were across the Rhine. But none of us felt like celebrating, because we knew it wasn't over yet. The bridge was a hollow victory. Sure, we had it, but it wasn't just the bridge we had to worry about. The whole damn German army wasn't going to let us keep it that easily. And deep down, we all knew that Remagen wasn't just a town. It was the gateway to the rest of Germany. If we held it, if we kept that bridge intact long enough, we might actually make a real difference. But the Germans weren't stupid. They would do anything to get it back. I remember walking across the span, every step feeling heavier than the last. The steel beneath my boots seemed to groan under the pressure, like it knew it was still on borrowed time. The whole place had a smell to it now, a mix of burnt rubber, gasoline, and death. It wasn't just the smell of war, it was the smell of something else. Something desperate, something that knew it was about to break. We dug in as best we could on the far side of the bridge, setting up positions on the hills overlooking the valley. The sun was setting by the time we settled in, casting long shadows across the field. The air was still, eerily quiet after the chaos we'd just come through. But none of us were fooled. We were too close to enemy lines, too deep in hostile territory for anything to feel safe. The orders came through fast, terse, and sharp: hold the bridge at all costs. The Germans were already regrouping, sending reinforcements toward Remagen from all directions. But the higher-ups didn't care. The bridge was ours now, and the war had to be decided here. There wasn't time to pull back, no room to retreat. That night, I remember staring at the river. The moonlight danced off the water, and for a moment it felt peaceful, so quiet, so still. But that's the trick about war, isn't it? The calm never lasts. I could feel it deep in my bones, that premonition of something coming. The Germans wouldn't let it go. They couldn't, and neither could we. We barely slept. The sound of artillery fire, distant at first, kept getting closer and closer until it felt like the ground itself was shaking under our feet. They were coming for us, and they weren't going to stop until they brought the bridge down. The morning brought the storm. The Germans hit us hard, their artillery pounding our positions, trying to break us before they could even set foot on the bridge. I saw one of our guys, Sergeant Miller, get caught by a shell burst, his body just crumpling, his face a mess of blood and dust. There was nothing we could do. Not for him. Not for anyone caught in that blast. The bridge was starting to feel like a ticking clock. We could hear the Germans getting closer, their tanks rumbling across the fields. The engineers were working frantically to secure the bridge, reinforcing the metal beams, trying to make sure it wouldn't collapse under the strain. But every time we thought we had a second to breathe, another explosion ripped through the air, shaking the ground beneath our feet. By noon, the air was thick with smoke and the sound of men yelling, orders being shouted over the chaos, and the crack of small arms fired. Our positions were being slowly overrun, and the bridge itself was under constant threat. German forces were pushing from both sides, trying to reclaim what they had lost. And all we had were rifles, a few machine guns, and the will to hold on for just a little longer. I remember watching a group of our engineers working near the center of the bridge, their faces grim as they cut through metal with blowtorches, trying to reinforce the weakened sections. But every few minutes, the Germans would land another shell, and we'd have to scramble to find cover. It felt like they knew exactly where to hit us, like they had eyes in the sky. Then came the worst moment. I was crouched behind a stack of rubble, my rifle at the ready, when I saw it, a group of German soldiers in the distance, creeping up on us under the cover of a smoke screen. They were coming for the bridge, for the heart of it. I didn't think. I just reacted. I took aim and fired. One shot, then another, and another. Each time I saw them fall two, maybe three of them, down in the mud, not getting back up. But the rest kept coming, kept pushing forward. I was firing when I heard the unmistakable sound of a rifle's crack, sharp, loud. And then the pain. It felt like a hammer blow to my chest. I barely had time to react before I went down, the world spinning as I hit the ground hard. My breath was knocked out of me. The pain was blinding. I thought I was done for. I remember trying to move, trying to crawl back to cover, but I couldn't feel my legs. For a long moment, all I could hear was the distant thrum of artillery and the low hum of my own breath. I was still alive. But for how long? I don't know how long I lay there. It could have been minutes or maybe hours. I don't know. But when I finally opened my eyes, I saw someone kneeling beside me. It was Daniels, a kid from Kentucky, barely 20. He had this look on his face, like he didn't know what the hell to do, but he was doing it anyway. He grabbed me by the shoulder, pulling me, dragging me back toward the cover of the ruined wall. And then I blacked out. When I came to, I was in a medic tent, the smell of antiseptic sharp in my nostrils. I tried to sit up, but the pain hit me like a wave. I couldn't move, not without someone helping me. Daniels was standing there, looking down at me, his expression unreadable. He didn't say anything, just looked at me like he was waiting for something. Maybe for me to speak first, or maybe for me to die so he wouldn't have to say anything at all. The bridge was still there, I was told. They hadn't come down yet, but none of us knew how long it would last. They didn't stop coming. Neither side did. The war kept grinding on, but that bridge, against all odds, kept standing. And I knew deep down that if we didn't get reinforcements soon, if we didn't make it across, we were going to be the ones going down with it. We were all just waiting for the final blow. The days blurred into one another. The tension was suffocating. No one talked much, but we didn't need to. The sound of artillery, the whine of incoming shells, and the occasional distant crack of gunfire told us all we needed to know. The Germans were coming, and they were coming with everything they had left. It didn't matter that we had the bridge. It didn't matter that we'd made it this far. The only thing that mattered now was holding on to it for dear life. But the truth was, we were running on fumes. I remember feeling so damn tired. I had seen things I couldn't unsee, heard things that would stay with me forever. It was like the whole world had come to a halt, and it was just me and the bridge, me and the men who were still with me, holding on. And that's all we had left each other. The medics had their hands full. The wounded came in waves, some barely alive, others completely unrecognizable. The stench of blood and sweat seemed to fill every corner of the makeshift hospital, and I could barely even distinguish between the moans of the dying and the constant rumble of the battle outside. It was almost like we were numb to it all. Not because we wanted to be, but because we had no choice. I had seen enough. I was done. But I wasn't the one in charge. They kept telling me to rest, to stay put, to wait for the next order, but I couldn't sit still. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. And it did. The Germans launched their biggest assault yet that afternoon. A barrage of artillery struck our positions, and the bridge itself began to shudder, the metal groaning under the weight of constant impact. We heard the telltale hiss of shells flying overhead, and then the ground shook like a beast waking from a long slumber. The bridge rattled, and for a moment I thought we were done. Then came a roar. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't even a sound I could describe. It was like the earth itself split open, the noise so intense it rattled every bone in my body. I couldn't even see the impact. It was as if the whole world had been swallowed by the blast. But I knew what had happened. They'd finally done it. The bridge didn't collapse, not entirely, but was hanging on by a thread. The explosion had torn a hole right through the middle, and the structure was listing to one side, its integrity compromised beyond repair. We had mere moments before it was too dangerous to cross. I grabbed my rifle and sprinted toward the wreckage. The air was thick with dust and smoke, and the sounds of battle grew more distant, replaced by the hiss of flames licking at the ruins of the bridge. I could feel the heat on my face as I approached, could feel the sweat beating on my forehead, mixing with the dirt. One of the engineers, an older guy I didn't know well, was standing by the edge of the bridge, peering down at the river below. His face was covered in soot, and his uniform was torn, but he was still moving, still trying to do something. "Is it over?" I asked him. I wasn't sure why I even bothered. The answer was obvious. He didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at the bridge, his hands shaking as he wiped the sweat from his brow. "No," he said finally, his voice low, barely above a whisper. "But it's going to be soon." I didn't need him to tell me that. I could see it for myself. The bridge was dying, but we weren't out of time yet. We had to make a decision, and fast. We could either reinforce what we had left of the structure and try to hold it as long as possible, or we could abandon it and retreat to safer ground. The bridge wasn't going to last much longer, and neither would we if we stayed. But I knew there was no going back. I looked around. The men were gathered in small groups, huddled together, some sitting, some standing, all of them staring at the bridge with the same weary, hopeless eyes. They weren't waiting for orders anymore. They were waiting for a sign that told them what to do next. And the sign was coming. It was in the way the Germans were circling, in the way they were gearing up for another assault. This wasn't just about holding the bridge. It was about holding on to something that still mattered. "We don't leave this damn bridge," I said. The words came out without thought. It wasn't a decision. I wasn't thinking clearly. It was just something I had to say, something I had to believe. The engineer nodded, then turned and shouted to the others, "Get ready. They're coming back. We hold this goddamn bridge, or we die trying." The next few minutes passed in a blur of noise, gunfire, and explosions. I couldn't tell who was yelling what, or who was still standing. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart and the sound of German boots thundering on the ground. We held our ground. I don't know how. We couldn't have, not with the way everything was falling apart around us. But somehow, we managed to fight through the madness, to keep our feet planted on that bridge, that damn bridge that was all but broken. And then, just when it felt like we couldn't take another hit, when the last bit of strength was gone, we heard it. The roar of tanks, the rumble of American reinforcements rolling down the road. It was like the heavens opened up. The Germans had been pushing for hours, but the tide had shifted. We weren't alone anymore. The reinforcements poured in, taking positions along the hills and down by the river. The bridge, though battered, though on the brink of collapse, held long enough for us to make that final push. When it was all over, when the last shot had been fired, when the last German had retreated, I stood there, looking at the bridge. It was still standing, barely. But it was enough. We'd done it. We'd crossed the Rhine. We had the bridge. And for that moment, it was worth every ounce of pain, every drop of blood. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The war was still out there, still raging across the continent. But we had crossed a line, one that would be remembered. A line that would make all the difference in the world. The Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen wasn't just a bridge. It was the doorway to the end of the war. And we had kicked that door wide open. But even as we stood there, amid the smoldering ruins of the bridge, the reality of what we had just done began to settle in. The sense of victory, of triumph, was fleeting. The bridge had held, yes, and that was a monumental achievement, but the war was still far from over. The enemy wasn't giving up, and neither were we. The Germans didn't retreat with their tails between their legs. No, they were regrouping, gathering what little strength they had left. And they were angrier than ever. The battle for Remagen had been one of the fiercest, most brutal clashes I'd ever seen, and it was clear that they weren't about to let us keep it without a fight. But we'd given them a taste of what was to come, a taste of how far we were willing to go. And that made all the difference. I was still recovering from the wounds I'd taken during that last assault, my chest aching with every breath. But I kept moving. We all did. There was no time to rest. The bridge wasn't going to defend itself, and we were the ones who had to make sure it stayed in our hands. The reinforcements had arrived, but they were few and scattered. We needed to keep the line strong, to hold fast against whatever the Germans threw at us next. We had to make sure that no matter what, that bridge remained a symbol of our resolve, a symbol of everything we had sacrificed to get here. The following days were filled with more attacks, more casualties. The German artillery kept us on edge, and every morning felt like it might be the last. Yet we still held our position, even as the bridge groaned under the strain of constant fire and bombardment. The engineers worked tirelessly, patching up the sections that had been blown apart, reinforcing what was left of the bridge's structure. It was like putting a band-aid on a gaping wound, but it was all we had. We had to make do. The nights were the worst. The quiet was deafening. I don't know how to describe it, but when the battle subsided, and all you could hear was the distant echo of artillery and the occasional scream of a wounded man, it felt like the world had stopped turning. It was in those quiet moments that the true weight of what we were doing hit me. The sheer exhaustion, the constant threat of death, the crushing responsibility of holding the line. We weren't just holding a bridge. We were holding the future of the war in our hands. I had one conversation during that time with a young soldier, one of the reinforcements. He was fresh from the States, wide-eyed and eager, still full of that American optimism. I don't think he understood yet what it meant to be in a battle like this. We talked briefly as we took a break from our positions on the bridge. "Do you think this is it?" he asked, looking out at the smoldering ruins, the wreckage of what had been a proud structure. I stared at the bridge, my eyes tracing the jagged edges of the metal that had once been solid and unyielding. "What do you mean? Is this it?" I asked, my voice raspy from days without proper rest. He shifted uncomfortably. "I mean, is this the end? Is this the thing that's going to end the war? The bridge? We're here, right here, and they're not going to take it from us, right?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the young kid, his face full of hope. I knew that hope. I'd seen it in myself once, but I also knew that the reality of war could crush that hope in an instant. I could see it in the faces of the men around me, in the way they moved and spoke. Everyone was waiting for the war to end. But I wasn't sure any of us really believed it would happen anytime soon. "This isn't the end, kid," I said finally, my voice hardening. "It's just another chapter. We've still got a long way to go." "And so do they." He looked at me, uncertainty flashing in his eyes, but he didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. That night, the Germans came again. Their tanks, their infantry, they came in waves, hoping to break us. It was another hellish onslaught. And for a moment, as we fought back, I thought maybe, just maybe, we weren't going to make it. The bridge shuddered under the impact of shells, and I could hear the metal screeching as though it, too, was fighting to hold on. We lost more men that night. Good men. But somehow, through sheer will, we pushed the Germans back again. We held the bridge. It felt like a miracle each time we did, but I knew it couldn't last forever. The Germans were relentless, and their resources were still vast. The next assault, or the one after that, might be the one that finally sent us tumbling into the river below. It was on the third day after that attack that we got word. Reinforcements were on the way. The Americans were finally pushing deeper into Germany, and Remagen had become the linchpin in their advance. The Germans knew it, and so did we. If we held it a little longer, the whole war could tip in our favor. But nothing was ever certain. The Germans weren't going to let that bridge stand for long. We knew they were preparing something big, something they hadn't shown us yet. And we could feel it in the air, in the way the winds picked up, how the birds seemed to fall silent. The end was drawing near. But the only thing we could do was hold on. And hold on we did. Day after day, hour after hour, the battles raged, and we fought like hell to keep the bridge intact. But as the days wore on, we realized something. It wasn't just the bridge we were protecting, it was something bigger. We were holding on to the idea that the end of the war could be within reach. That the moment was coming when we could finally say, we did it. We were part of this. The Germans never got that bridge back. They tried, God knows they tried. But every time they came at us, they found the bridge still standing, the Americans still holding it. Eventually, the Germans were forced to retreat. They couldn't stop us anymore. They couldn't stop the tide that was turning in our favor. The Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen, our bridge, became the symbol of that turning tide. And when the war finally ended, when we were standing in Berlin, when we saw the swastika come down, I knew that what we had done at Remagen had played a part in that. We'd made history. It was hard to feel proud of it in the moment, though. The cost had been too high. The losses, the sacrifices, those would never leave me. They would never leave any of us who had been there. But the bridge stood, and for the men who held it, we had done our part. And that, in the end, was all we could do.